I call this meeting of the Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. And thank you all for being here tonight. We really appreciate your participation in these meetings. Tonight is the last board meeting at this building. And starting August 27th, all board meetings will be at the new boardroom at the new Achievement Service Center, 1702 Main Street. The boardroom will continue to be called the Jim Hester Boardroom, which is on the second floor. And when you get there, take the elevator to the second floor. It's right there as you get off the elevator. I'm not sure. There's two elevators, though, aren't there? No. Just one? No. Okay. And we'll have signs and stuff, certainly, but we want you to continue to participate if possible. We do appreciate your attendance at this board meeting. By attending meetings, you can learn about the accomplishments, needs, and concerns we face. The board meets regularly on the first Monday for committee of the whole meetings and the second and fourth Mondays of each month for regular meetings. Open forum for the public is available only at the regular meetings. All meetings are open to the public except closed and exempt sessions, which are permitted by certain sections of Iowa Code. All board decisions, however, are made in public, open sessions. The board is not a forum. It is a deliberative body. Accordingly, it receives communications, both oral and written, as a medium of information. It does not debate the contents of such communications, but considers them in making decisions and in the establishment of policies. During each regular board meeting, there is an opportunity to address the board by completing an open forum request and giving it to the board secretary prior to the meeting. Each person may have up to 2 minutes to speak. This is a time of listening by the school board, so the board does not make any comments during open forum. The issue will usually be referred to the administration for further study and follow-up if necessary. When the board president recognizes you, direct your comments to the entire board and limit your remarks to 2 minutes, unless extra time has been approved by the board president prior to the meeting. The school board president will recognize one speaker at a time and will rule out of order other speakers who are not recognized. Only those speakers recognized by the chair will be allowed to speak. Comments by others are out of order. The school board president shall promptly rule out of order any discussion by any person, including school board members, that would violate the provisions of state or federal law, our open forum policy, or the statutory rights of privacy of an individual. To ensure that the board can conduct the important business of the district, the following guidelines apply to all members of the public who attend board meetings. The board asks that all members of the public treat open forum speakers, district employees, and the board with respect. Individuals are not permitted to engage in conduct that interferes with the ability of other individuals to watch the board meetings, interferes with the ability of other members of the public to offer comment to the board, or interferes with the ability of the board to conduct its business. Demonstrations during public comments, such as clapping or cheering in response to either public comments or statements made by the board members, is discouraged. Those wishing to display placards, signs, or banners may not block any attendee's view of the proceedings. So, we'll start with our board priorities, and Director Hayes, would you read those for us, please?
Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff, and to direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impact of poverty on our students, their families, and our community.
Thank you very much. Director Baek, would you please read our mission and vision statements?
Absolutely. The mission statement: enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community, Vision statement, education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you very much. We have a special presentation this evening from Katerina Bolton, and you're here. And I want to make a couple of comments because I'm sure that Katerina will have some good ideas and suggestions that can be considered and followed up by the administration. Please note, everybody, that this is not a discussion but a presentation. Board members are welcome to make comments as we do with all presentations, but please be concise as we anticipate a relatively long meeting this evening. Katerina, the floor is yours. And thank you for being here.
Where do I put my flash drive at?
Mary, can you help her? I don't know where it goes.
Well, you said you just need an outline. So this is just the outline. I have an actual presentation. Okay.
And while she's helping you, Katerina, if you'd give us your name and address.
Katerina Bolton, resident here, Davenport, 1920 Walling Court.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I guess while she's doing that, I just want to thank you for allowing me tonight to present on this topic regarding unity.
Well, you're more than welcome. This is a special presentation. Katerina has been trying to get this particular presentation for quite some time, and I think we allocated 10 minutes for your presentation.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, thank you. Okay, so as I said, thank you again for allowing me to be here to present this topic. Thank you to each of the board members. Here, I'm just going to highlight some information. If you remember, board members, Director DeSalvo, on March 12th, when you had here at the board meeting expressed your concerns with the your frustrations with the project at North being moved back. You have been tirelessly, as you should be, advocating for something that was near and dear to you for almost 2 years, and come to find out that it's getting moved backwards. So I want you all to think of a time, if you can, right now, of a time when you've advocated for something and you've really were hitting some roadblocks. So if you can either close your eyes or just imagine a time that you've dealt with that. But instead of picturing a facility, picture your child. And so picture that your child is at an age where they're full of energy, full of hope, full of their full potential, but you knew there was something that wasn't quite right. Now you're at your parent-teacher conference, and your teacher also confirms your same inkling. And then you're told that there will be an evaluation by a specialist at the school that will figure out what came first, chicken or the egg, behavior or academics. 2 months later, you get called in to what you think is going to be discussed, the evaluation results, and instead, it's to discuss placement at Keystone for behavior. The principal tells you that there's no money to complete the evaluation, and that it's not going to happen. Your child is now sent out of school, and you're awaiting the hearing with a district. So what you thought was going to move forward actually went 10 steps back. And so as you've explained your frustrations with the inequality between these high schools, the different budgets, 4 different high schools, but yet North has half of what the rest of the high schools have. There's 4 different high schools, and yet North is being treated differently. That's where we're at right now. Our children are being differently. We share the same passion as you do, but our passion is a free, appropriate education for our children. And right now, many of them are not getting that. So something a little more light. To discuss history Davenport schools 160 years ago. 1858, we got a small loan, $500, that started the district. Phoebe Sudlow, first female superintendent in the nation, 1874. Pretty amazing. To establish some common ground, why people become teachers. They want to work with young children and they want to make a difference. So already we've established some common ground. We want the success of our children, which are your children, the teachers' children in the district here, and we want Davenport schools to succeed. We all want that. So why change now? Parents don't know what they don't know. Community members don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Why not sooner? Continuous improvement. Have you seen the special education edit results? Have you seen the juvenile crime rate in Davenport? Our district and city are in crisis. Director Baek and Director Mayfield continue to ask Dr. Tate and the board to investigate the underlying issue of declining enrollment. James Baldwin has said, "I can't believe what you say because I see what you do." In a nutshell, unfortunately, this is the current climate in the Davenport School District. This little snippet here is an insert of what was passed out on the 6th of August, a complaint, Davenport Schools. A teacher filed a complaint regarding the treatment of children in special ed. I don't know if you guys have had time to look at that. That was handed out on the 6th. But here, what it shows is that a teacher was involuntarily moved and took a pay cut. And if you look at this record here, it shows that she spoke out about the illegal, and by the way, this was obtained by the Freedom of Information Act. I didn't get this from anyone in regards to this. This was under the Freedom of Information Act where I got this from. So she spoke out about the illegal practices at a particular school. Next day comes, as you can see there, next week, whatever, she's involuntarily moved. Director Baek DeSalvo, as you mentioned before, it being pushed back after people were told that it was going to move forward for the North Project. Now the district administration proved skepticism and they lost any confidence. Going back here, the district on the 28th of June and city members met. There's clear tension that has been created. So here, these are only a few examples of retaliation and no trust. Our teachers, children, and community are suffering as a result. We need an independent school climate evaluation that will address the underlying issues and lay out a clear path for positive change. This is just another example of lack of communication between special ed and Special Ed Advisory Council and parents. And we do thank you, board members, for allowing us more time for that issue. If you recall, that special ed plan was being put out when we didn't agree with it. During the special ed audit results, Director Hayes had asked Superintendent Tate if there are teachers that are uncomfortable with students of color. Tate, quote, "We have to do better. It's probably the biggest challenge of our time." Yet we are acting as though the biggest challenge of our time is spending reserve funds to tighten security. It's more palatable to discuss and pursue security than it is to discuss underlying issues regarding disproportionality with our students in regards to school climate and minorities and the treatment of students with disabilities. The use of seclusion rooms, which is heavily reported in the audit. Minor infractions included touching a doorknob. Instead of narrowing the prison to pipeline, we are widening this issue by the use of seclusion rooms, increased security, and giving those who are not culturally aware a false sense of safety. By doing this, we are engaging in confrontation instead of conversation. These names here, all of these people who had disabilities had died at the hands of untrained police officers. Police were called on them, and because the police officers did not have the proper training to deal with them, whether they had a mental disability, they had autism, or they were deaf, because they couldn't follow orders the way the police officer wanted them to. Obviously, if you're deaf, you can't. And unfortunately, they were killed at the hands of police that were untrained. According to the National Center for Safety here, there's only 12 states in the entire United States that require student resource officers to have specific training. Iowa is not one of them. So our resource officers that are in here in the schools do not have mandatory training, or they don't have any training to deal with children. They're here under law. They're not here in the and the formality of dealing with our children and some of the issues that our children are dealing with. This information here, just informational, regarding changes. National School Board Association, new data from the civil rights shows that our children with disabilities and minorities have severe punishment, far more than those students who do not. Social and emotional learning. This here is kind of, our children may look like a shark on the surface, may look enraged, may look really mad, but underneath they're just really, confused goldfish. This information here was from the Iowa Department of Education. There's been research that shows social and emotional learning has positive impacts for the school, and so bringing this again is that I know that there's some resources that have been left unused in the district for social and emotional training for teachers, and I understand that there's trauma-informed teaching that happens, but when our policies are not changed to match what we practice, it doesn't do much of any good. So Davenport, or district-wide Davenport. So our mission is of the district-wide Davenport PTO is to support and connect all stakeholders, bring resources, and ensure our districts aspire to equitably serve every student so that each reaches their true potential. So contrary to popular belief, we are not the Mads Bomb Club, and we do not want extra things that other students or families do or do not get. None of us knew each other before district-wide Davenport. We met at coming to board meetings and speaking out against the inequalities for special education or with our children. I understand that there is an implementation advisor, but that is required by the state. And in our current school climate, that implementation school advisor, because of the audits, is not going to make much change in our current school climate. So regardless of what implementation advisor does. So I guess my time is up, but I would just like to say our members have several years. Gina Hill has been a teacher for over 30 years. She's also written curriculum and developed professional development for teachers. Our parent Tara, she is community advocate. Pretty much all of us have more than one child in the district. And it's our child with special disabilities that has shined the light on the issues with it. You really don't know how broken a system is until you actually have dealt with it. So these are our action groups. We would like to form an alliance with the district, how you can help us, how we can help you. Again, regardless of what the special ed audit survey or updates say online, parents are not satisfied with their care. As you can see, there's teachers themselves who are afraid for retaliation. You're not going to get an honest opinion from a parent at an IEP meeting. So this in individual school climate, we would like that done. That should give a clear path and be completely confidential. That looks at our school climate and helps us advance to how can we do better. Again, trauma informed happens once a year, but our policies in a district stay the same. Doesn't really do much of anything. The advisory council that we would like, it was definitely made for arbitrary reasons. The last time we were there, we would like to see community involved, and we would like to see more parents involved instead of sending it to one or two people by email. And then we want authentic consideration and input, and for our recommendations to be heard before policies are implemented or changed. And that is pretty much it. So thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Katerina. Are there any comments from the board? Director DeSalvo.
Thank you for coming forward tonight. You went through that really, really quickly, and I wondered if we could get a copy of your
Yes, I
presentation.
will send it to all of you by email.
That would be helpful, because there's a lot of information in there and trying to read and listen, and it was
Right, and I cited all my sources in there
Sure.
too, so that
Excellent.
way you can just click on the link and see the information as well.
perfect. I appreciate that. And I'm a parent. I understand. I shouldn't say I understand. I'm here to listen. We're trying to all understand this. So I truly hope that we can work together to find some common good answers to some of these situations that we have. And I appreciate the time. I appreciate all of you. I know you've spent a lot of time at these meetings, and we are listening. We do want to make this better, and we do appreciate you being here and all that you've done.
Thank you. It takes deliberate action for anything to change. So I'm hoping that's what this will do, is bring attention to that deliberate action and purposeful, and it needs to be deliberate. So I understand, but until we make deliberate change, and having this conversation is a good first step. So thank you again for being here.
Any other thoughts? Director Hayes.
I also thank you for coming and speaking on some of the things. And you have to understand that we're not in administration, we're not in schools. We hear the stories and we just have to take it from, what we hear. But I do appreciate your time. And if you could, just a little bit, you mentioned honesty in an IEP. Isn't that pretty much just cut and dry? Could you elaborate just a little bit
Say
more
that
on
again. What was the question?
The honesty, you had mentioned something about honesty at the IEP meetings.
Oh, so I said that, so as far as there's been updates on the district website about the special ed along the way, and one of the updates said that there's been a lot of comments that parents are satisfied with the process. So I was just saying that most times it's not honest, that parents, they're not, again, obviously there's some of the examples that I showed you through this PowerPoint showed clear retaliation, tension, lack of trust between the district and parents. You have a parent most times who's in an IEP meeting who has very few people that are there to support them, that are there, that by their side, that know the actual special education law. And then you have the director of special education in there. You have the administration at the school district. And this has been talked about before. So I know that you guys know that there's a huge presence of the administration, but not much for teachers or for students or for parents. So during that time, you're wanting to get what's best for your child. Not very many parents are going to speak out and say, no, we don't like your process. We don't think what you're doing is, correct, or we don't agree with it. Parents are scared. They don't want their child to suffer because of it. And because of our position, and because we are reaching out to parents, myself included, and some of the other parents in the audience here, they have been retaliated against for speaking out against some of it. So there's been someone who their child was put in a seclusion room for X amount of days or for X amount of hours after their child advocated for themselves and said, these are what maybe my accommodations are. This is what's supposed to be happening. So, of course, they're not going to be completely honest. And parents aren't always going to speak out. And we are, and we've made this group because we see the overwhelming amount of parents who are afraid, who are truly afraid of the IEP team because of the entire process. They're scared and they don't know what to do. People are leaving, homeschooling. This school climate may answer, this evaluation may answer some of those questions. So I think that having that would be a great first start.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Director Mayfield.
I applaud the fact that you come here and speak about something you believe,
Thank you.
even if others oppose what you're saying or ignore it and act like it's not really happening. Unfortunately, we have so many issues, starting with our students leaving the district, and I think that hurts us as a school financially. But what goes on an everyday basis hurts us even more. I know you can be victimized because you stand up and you speak the truth, because I've been victimized. I just don't talk about it because I ignore it. And when I say that, I'm talking about I've been victimized by people that have power in our school district.
Mm-hmm.
So I know what it takes for you to stand here and say this because you're worried about the repercussions for your child.
I am, but
But you speak anyway.
right.
We talk about all these great things that we're doing in the district, but our personal relationship with the people that we're supposed to be helping, and I'm talking about our students and our parents, should be the number one element in making us successful. I could sit here and give you 20 things that we have done to, whether it be annoyed or offend parents. I don't think this is the time for it. But it has to be addressed. If we want to attract people to this district, you know, we know about the special ed situation, and I think it needs to be kept up front. We should not ignore it because we spoke about it 2 or 3 times. We know about the inadequacies in the district, and we talk every day about it's supposed to be for everyone to get that great education, and we know it's not happening.
Right.
And I'm not pointing fingers at one entity. You know, we always talk about the homes that they come from, but I can always tell you that there are places where the same type of kids with the same background are succeeding. When we have
It's in my household. I know, it's in my household.
when we have schools that are successful, programs that are successful, programs that parents want to support, and we take them out anyway, we're hurting the school district. And I'm talking, we sit and say that our administrators, our staff know what they're doing and they're all professionals, which I think is the case. But those that control the whole system, unfortunately, are the ones that make the decisions on whether parents are getting what they want.
Or what they need, their
Or
children need.
A combination of both. So I hope just having you come here and speak, and the other people that have came here and speak, that we start listening, and if we really want the change that we talk about, then we have to include parents in it in a different manner, not just when they go along with what you say,
Right,
but when they disagree and want things changed
right,
is what it's going to take to keep people in our district.
right.
If every child that has the ability can fulfill their potential, and that's different potential for every child, then I know most parents would be happy. And there are a lot of unhappy parents out there because of the way we operate. And that's why we have a lot of folks that leave. But anyway, I'll stop at that.
Right, I would
Thank
agree.
you for coming and speaking.
It's not white flight or violence. It's how you attract our kids to our district. And right now, we're only attracting the ones that we think can be successful. Look at the Creative Arts Academy. That's a whole nother conversation. But anyways, thank you. And yes, I agree.
Director Baek.
Sort of at the end of your presentation there, you had a little bit of a proposal
Oh, yeah.
for an evaluation. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so a school climate evaluation, there's so many of them, and they each do different things. But with the school climate evaluation that I would like to see is that it's completely confidential, that it's given to everyone in the district, and that it addresses our underlying issues that you too have been so adamantly speaking out against with declining enrollment. It's not one thing, it's several things. And this district, I mean, I'm a Davenport resident. I want to stay here. I don't want to go anywhere. But I have had to look at alternative options, and I'm still juggling with that. Like you have said, if we don't, we're going to sink with it. If we don't address the issues, we're going to sink with it. So with that school climate, I am hopeful that having that will address some of those issues. Our district, our teachers and staff need training. Trauma-informed happens every so often, but again, our policies don't match what our teachers are being trained for. So we need, I don't know if reform is the right word, that sounds kind of, whatever, but we need clear path of positive way to get on the right path so that we can address these issues in a deliberate manner and that we can make the change. There are certain things that are working and they're great for certain students, but there's a lot of things that are not working and they need to be addressed, and there needs to be a deliberate action on that. and so with that school climate. And then also with the advisory committee that we had at one point, Bill Schnaden last time headed that. We need more involvement with parents on that. It needs to be front and center, like how the results are on the special ed. We need other community members that are involved, and we would like to see advocate groups such as Ask, Resource, and Understood that can come in and give training to parents and staff and let them know what their rights are. Discuss what the role is between the district, between the parents, teachers. So, helping establish advocates. One of the things I didn't mention in my beginning was I was told there would be no evaluation. The principal told me there would be no evaluation because there wasn't the funds. But they never tell you that you can request your own evaluation. It's kind of like a secret. Your teacher's not going to tell you, hey, I think there's something wrong with your child. I think you should get an evaluation. It's kind of like hush hush. Because again, there's funds. There's different funding for special education. Again, like you said, there's different funding for different high schools. That's not right. Just because it is the way it is doesn't mean that should be the way that it is. So yeah, we are hoping that we can have that group and have community involvement other than just the district administration running those groups.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? All right. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Katerina. We'll move on to board reports. Are there any? Director DeSalvo.
I'll speak for Director Potts and myself. We had a meeting last week, our first meeting following the meeting with the City Council. So 4 of us were appointed, Carrie Tompkins, myself, Mike Maloney, and Bruce Potts. And then the mayor met, and Ralph came for a little bit. Mike Maloney. I'm sorry. It wasn't Mike Maloney. Mike Matson. I'm so sorry. Mike, you were there. I apologize. So the mayor was there and Ralph was there, kind of kicked off the meeting for us. And then they left the 4 of us there just to talk about, kind of an understanding of how we want things to progress between the city council and our school board. We talked a lot about communication. Director Potts brought up a huge example that really got us thinking about things. When he was principal at Sudlow, a week before school was going to start, the city dug up the street right in front of Sudlow. So those kind of things we thought would be really, really important for the other side to know. There's certain things that we can share that can help one another. So I think we are on a very good start to working together collaboratively and opening up the communication. So we're going to meet monthly. We've got a couple to-dos that we have to follow up on, and they have a couple to-dos. So really, really good first meeting, and I'm feeling very positive about where we're going to go with that. So it was a very good start. A couple other things. It's been a long time since we met. I had the opportunity to go to a couple of baseball games for our high schools that were in the playoffs. And I was incredibly proud just to be there because our high schools were playing in the playoffs, and it wasn't Pleasant Valley playing. We did play North Scott one time, but it wasn't Bettendorf. It was a Davenport Community School baseball teams that were vying for a state game. Unfortunately, they didn't win, but the cool thing, and I'm getting goosebumps talking about, the cool thing to me was West was playing. West had beat Central, or I don't even remember that. First I went to a Central game, then I went to a West game, and the Central kids came and cheered on the West kids. And West won that night. It was an amazing game. They beat a Dubuque team by like 1 run. I don't even remember what. It was very, very close to the very last inning. It was amazing. The next game, West played again, and there were Central kids there cheering on our West kids. There were North kids there cheering on our West kids. They ended up losing to North Scott, but they competed. They competed very, very well. I was incredibly proud of the kids on the field competing, but even more proud of those in the audience cheering on their own district rivals to get somewhere. So it was amazing. So people that don't think we can't compete, we can compete. And it was really, really good. I was very impressed. And another competitor that I happened to see was running the Bix, was our own Dr. Tate, as he ran by me, and before I figured out he was going so fast I couldn't figure out who it was. But I saw a lot of kids with Central shirts on that were jogging, so it was amazing the turnout of our students there. Then I had the opportunity to go to a scholarship award banquet for the LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. They gave over $50,000 in grants to our kids. Many of them were from the Davenport Community School District. So again, something we should all be very, very proud of, that our kids are out there earning scholarships. And I got to see a lot of that firsthand. So again, incredibly proud of what our kids are doing out there, even during the summer when they should be having fun.
Thank you very much. Any additional board reports? Director Potts.
On Saturday, or Friday the 10th, I attended the administrative in-service at the Radisson connected to the remediation plan for our special education department. It was very interesting to be there. Sandy Schmitz is the implementation advisor. Thank you. I was going to call her the ombudsman, but the implementation advisor that's going to be with us for the next 2 years, about 4 days a week, to facilitate the changes that need to take place in our program. They laid out a rather extensive staff development challenge initiative that's going to take quite a bit of time and quite a bit of effort, and hopefully will bear the fruit that we need to have borne. After this meeting, then they're going to start meeting with, roll out some of this stuff with the staff. It was very well attended, very interesting, very thought-provoking, and she seems to be a pretty sharp cookie, and she's pretty well versed on the deficiencies that we're dealing with. So, and I got a free lunch.
Thank you very much. Any other board reports? I had a few, but I brought the wrong pages. I do want to say that I met with Sandy Schmitz also last week, and met with her for about an hour, and we were talking about all of this that's going on, and there's going to be a presentation sometime in the next few weeks, and it, I think, will help everybody understand what's going on, not only with special ed, but with other things that are going on in our district. And during that time that I spent with Sandy, I must say that I developed 100% confidence in her capabilities in helping our district and our community to address some of these issues. And some of these were brought to light certainly through the audit and the citations, but she has complete confidence in our district and our board and our community that we can address these. I attended the session that Director Potts mentioned also, but only for a brief time, but I was really excited to see what was going on there, and I think it'll be very interesting as we move forward. I think this is a big, it's a big deal for the whole district, and I think in a few weeks we'll see exactly where the administration has been. My impression is that the administration, the special ed department, a lot of people have been putting a lot of effort into figuring all of this out and how do we address it. So I think we can all look forward to that. The only other thing I wanted to mention that's been discussed also by a couple of board members is that the efforts to collaborate with the city, that's a pretty big deal also. And you can imagine when you see what's going on in the paper or in the news, how are we working together? The example that Director DeSalvo gave that Director Potts had actually happened to him is one of the things that has happened. But there are other times within our community where the district and the or the board and the city may not know what's going on between themselves. And sometimes that causes tension, sometimes problems. And so that's part of what we're trying to address. And we have a lot of confidence in those four people that they will be developing a memorandum of understanding or an approach to how do we more effectively communicate. And so it really is important. It may seem simple, but it can be really challenging. So I think that's it for me. Any other board reports? If not, we'll move on to upcoming events. Director Potts, would you please read those for us?
August 23rd, Thursday, first day of school, 1st through 12th grades. It's kindergarten testing day. August 24th, Friday, kindergarten's first day of school. August 27th, Monday, 6 p.m., regular board meeting in the new Jim Hester Boardroom, 2nd floor, 1702 Main Street. September 3rd, Monday is a holiday. Schools are closed. September 4th, Tuesday, 5:30 is Committee of the Whole meeting in the new Jim Hester Boardroom, 2nd floor, 1702 Main Street. September 5th, Wednesday, 6 to 7:30 p.m. is the last Vision 2020 Public Forum at the North High School Auditorium. And September 11th, Tuesday, 5:30 is a board workshop, location to be determined.
You missed a couple.
What did I miss?
Scroll up. I can't take your. He missed a couple. Hold on.
Well, okay. August 21st is a Tuesday, and you can attend open house for the intermediates and the high schools. And October 22nd, Wednesday, is Unpack Your Backpack for the elementary schools and Walcott K-8.
Is that it?
I believe so.
Okay. Thank you very
If
much.
not, I'm sure she'll help me out again.
All right.
That's-
Okay, we'll move on to open forum. Open forum is a time for members of the community to give input at a board meeting regarding school district issues or concerns. Individuals who want to speak should fill out an open forum request and give it to the board secretary prior to open forum. The board will not act on any issue presented during open forum if it was not published as an agenda item. The Iowa Open Meetings Law prohibits action on any issue that is not on the agenda. The president will set the amount of time allowed for individuals to speak during open forum. The board asks that no charges or complaints be made against individual employees of the district or community during open forum. Remarks that reflect negatively on the character or motives of any person will be called out of order. We have 6 open forum requests tonight. And so each of you, when you come up, go ahead and give us your name and address at the microphone. And you will each have 2 minutes. I'm going to read through everybody's name that's here and just kind of follow in that order. First is Kristan Rose, John DeTay, Charlotte Shepard, Carrie Dugan, Karen Gordon, Sandy Ellis. So if you'll come up in that order, that would be great.
Kristan Rose, 2411 Fulton Avenue, 52803. All right, thank you all for letting me speak tonight. I returned to the workforce a year and a half ago when I accepted a para position at Smart Intermediate. As most people do, I felt a little leery, not knowing what to expect from the neighborhood, the kids, the rumors. I thought, well, it's a foot in the door. If I'm patient, I can eventually realign at a school my kids attend. I knew within a month that that wouldn't happen, and I've passed up postings since. When SMART was announced as the school to close last spring, we lost all 3 of our wonderful secretaries. As many of us have, I contemplated realigning back then, but chose instead to apply for those secretary positions. That's where I sit today, and there's nowhere I'd rather be. But secretaries hear a lot. In just 2 weeks on the job, I've talked with so many parents about online registration, and I'm even more convinced, if that's even possible, that SMART needs to stay open. From working with new bell times to other transportation issues to computer access and figuring out how they're going to get to school to register the kids during building hours, these families face so many obstacles most of us never have to think about. They don't need one more barrier. The SMART family is incredible. I've never seen a single group of people so dedicated to their jobs, their students, and each other.
I fear for the disruption of this well-oiled machine and for how our teachers' daily responsibilities will be affected by consolidation with Monroe. Our primary concern is for our kids, and I know I speak for all of us when I say that we appreciate and applaud Director Baek's efforts to come up with a viable alternative to completely closing a school. I had my reservations at first, concerned primarily with situations like having an 8th grader in the office with a behavioral issue and then having a kindergartner walk in. I thought maybe with some construction, the younger kids could be kept fairly isolated from the older kids. It might work. It's working toward a compromise after all. But after thinking more and talking with others, it's clear that teachers would still have to leave from both Monroe and Smart, having fewer overall elementary and intermediate kids attending. It would not only be impossible for our library to hold an entire catalog of elementary and intermediate books, but would be impossible for our librarian to do both. We'd need to have a full second library built, along with who knows what else. All positions at Monroe and Smart in specials like music and art would likely be consolidated. And since those positions don't open elsewhere frequently, teachers who love teaching their specialty might have to go teach second grade somewhere. Their job, it's shifting into another position simply isn't feasible. It's still a job, yes, but they're so good at what they do. I haven't seen the numbers, but I'm not sure that the cost of renovations, when this is truly thought out in detail, is worth the loss of staff and still displacing students. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristan.
Good evening. My name is John Dutay. I am at 1110 East High Street in Davenport, 52803. Congratulations on working with the city on the MOU. I think that's amazing. As taxpayers, we really want to see our elected officials representing us in a coherent, collaborative way, and so I think these are really good steps moving forward. I'd like to speak to items that are on the agenda, section 901 and 903, and since it is on the agenda, if there's an opportunity for me to come back to the podium to speak, since these are items to be discussed later on in the agenda, I'd like to do that. Regarding section 901, the selection of a new superintendent, there's a consultant who uses best practices on searching for superintendents. Her name is Terry Davis, and she's written an article about superintendent searches, public or confidential. She writes, Board of Education members come and go, but the community remains. Wise candidates for a superintendent's position, as well as the dedicated board members involved in fulfilling this important duty, understand this and therefore want the public to be a part of the superintendent search process. Some school board members, owing to their election by the community, believe they make all the decisions, start to finish, effectively leaving the community in the dark. Those actions become arrogant and we know best attitude in the wider community by the board. In taking this stance that it knows the community better, needs better than anyone else, the board forgets that the community owns the schools and should be involved and kept fully informed regarding its investments. A board of education should not even think about posting the open position for a superintendent until it knows what is it looking for in a candidate. Even though board members represent the community at large, few are in such close touch with the community as to know what the community is thinking when it comes to hiring a new school superintendent. Community members, parents, district employees, students should be asked what they would like to see in the new superintendent as to the professional characteristics, leadership skills, and personality traits. So I really hope before you hire a headhunter that you'll hire a consultant that will convene multiple community meetings to weigh what we would like in our next superintendent. Regarding section 903 on the agenda, I noticed that only option B is on the agenda for tonight, and I really hope that you will consider option A and a half, which was proposed by some board members at the COW meeting, where there would be consolidation. The COW meeting is not a meeting where you take an official vote. That's very clear. So to eliminate a whole option without the public being a part of that discussion, I think is unfair. Katerina's reflection really caused me to reflect on one of the first board meetings I ever came to. And that was when Marlo Clark and a few others presented a video saying, now that you know, what are you going to do about it? And there was not a dry eye in the house. It was a video about kids living in poverty, kids in homelessness, kids impacted by abuse. And a few months later, you voted to close a school in the heart of the city where we have the most challenges. And now we're here back again where you, back in March or April, we're going to close another school in the heart of our community where we have the most challenges. We need a school board that listens to the community. We need a school board that will read the Quad City Times editorial in April. That the headline was, Davenport's racial inequity is undeniable. We have huge systemic inequities throughout our system. There are kids being suspended out of our school system and going directly into our juvenile justice system. We're about to spend thousands, if not millions of dollars on kids that are being put through a juvenile assessment center when they're no longer in our school district. We've got to address this issue of race in the school board. We spent hours, you know how many hours you spent on the issue of solar panels. We've got to talk about the racial inequities in our school district. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next up is Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Shepard. I am a science teacher at SMART, and I live at 2500 St. John's Court in Bettendorf, Iowa. As we move forward in our Vision 2020 discussions, I wanted to say that I appreciate the open-mindedness that this board has shown, and I also appreciate the transparency. I could tell in the last COW meeting that everybody here takes the issue very, very seriously and was here to listen and learn about it. And everybody truly cares about finding the best possible outcome for students. Even though we might disagree on which solutions will be the most effective, I think we can all agree that there isn't a person in this room who isn't doing their best to put the needs of our students first. I was so happy to see a plan that doesn't close a single school or displace a single student. I really hope that you continue to pursue this option. I did want to emphasize that combining Monroe and SMART into a single K-8 school might have some unintended consequences and would be effectively the same as closing a school. I think if you speak with the SMART staff that is here tonight, maybe after the meeting, we could provide you with a laundry list of reasons that going to K-8 at SMART so quickly would not be beneficial. Both Monroe and SMART have an excellent staff that is focused on serving the community. Both schools have become multi-generational fixtures within the community. Please don't pull any of that staff from the community that they have worked so hard to integrate themselves into. But most importantly, some students would be displaced by a merger. The last estimate I heard was around 100 students. While this might not seem like very many, the impact on those students would be significant. There's very little long-term research on what happens to students when their schools close. Earlier today, I emailed the board members with the results of a study conducted in Houston. This study found that school closings primarily affect low-income and minority students. Students who have been displaced by a school closure also tend to have a flattened achievement arc and perform below their peers who have not been displaced. This Houston study was one of the very few long-term academic studies that I could find. Because mass school closings are a somewhat recent phenomenon, we don't fully understand the impact it can have on students. I struggle with the idea of using a strategy that isn't supported by data. We don't do that in our classrooms, and we shouldn't when we address our budget issues either. There's not enough data to support the drastic strategy of closing a school. I believe in the intelligence and ingenuity of DCSD staff, and I know that we can all pull together and find ways to save money that are less drastic than closing a school. If we are facing a budget crisis, then we may have to cut back on things, but we cannot cut back on the most important thing that we have to offer our most vulnerable students, which is stability. Many students have found a home at SMART, as you've heard my colleagues say very eloquently at past board meetings and forums. To think of even losing a single one of them is heartbreaking. My coworkers have also found a home at SMART. Please allow all of us, students and staff, to stay in this community and continue our work. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Charlotte. Next is Carrie Dugan.
Hello, I'm Carrie Dugan, 630 East Colorado Street in Davenport. And I just want to reiterate what Katerina said. We appreciate being able to come and speak and being heard. Director Baek was very generous in coming and doing a coffee with our board director, and we really appreciate that. I would just like to point out a couple things that have been mentioned. I want to caution you. I hear a great deal of confidence that things are going to be fine. I want to caution you to not be overly confident. We all want things to be fine. We all hope they'll be fine. But sometimes if we're overly confident, we can ignore the reality. The Iowa Department of Education does amazing things. Something unfortunate, though, is that they do not actually require our schools to do best practice. I just read the decision in the state complaint that we've been talking about. It's mentioned in there. So what that means is that what their requirements of us are may not actually be in our children's best interests. And so we may actually need to rise above and find out what's best for our kids. And a way to do that is to get an independent school climate evaluation from a national reputable source. What they'll do for you is answer all these questions that people come up here and ask. What's going on with the race issue? What's going on with poverty? What's going on in special education? What's going on in bullying? What's going on in your district? They will be able to give you the answers to the questions you're asking yourselves. And it will be someone who you bring in. It's not parents yelling at you, telling you how that should be. So I just want to encourage you to really take the time now to do that. The district is in crisis, as we know. The city is in crisis, as we know. So this is really the time to step up, and bring a positive force in that. I'm glad that you guys have talked with this implementation specialist. I'm really encouraged to hear you guys' feedback. I have also spoken with her, and the message was very clear to me that because my child did not get selected for the audit, she is not here to help me. So I would really ask you to be open to other people's perspectives and what's going on. We need to involve the parents. We have yet to do that. So I guess what I want to reiterate is what many people have said, and Director Baek and Director Mayfield have expressed tirelessly, is that budget cuts are not going to solve these problems. We can cut and cut and cut and cut. It will never solve the problems because we're not dealing with the underlying problems. An evaluation will do that. So really, I just urge you, as soon as possible, to bring in a nationally reputable, independent school climate firm. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Next is Karen Gordon.
Hello again. Karen Gordon, 2415 North Fairmount Street in Davenport. Last year at work, I was having a conversation with a teacher who I really respect and admire, and she said something that really stuck with me. She said, and I'm paraphrasing this, "If a child says that I don't like them, that means I'm not doing my job well, and it means I need to spend more time interacting positively with that student. I don't dislike any of my students, but if they perceive that I do, then that is their reality, and I need to work harder to fix that." This struck me because while there's definitely a difference between perception and reality, it can also be said that perception affects reality. I can't speak for everyone, but among the groups of parents and employees that I know, I have heard time and time again that the Davenport School District administration and board members don't listen and don't care about what the community wants. This is a perception, but it's a widely held one. A reality is that when community members feel unheard, unsupported, and unimportant to the decision-making process, they will leave that community. I admit I've only been paying close attention to the district and board decisions for about the last 5 years. In that time, there have been several situations where the community has voiced their opinions and concerns and have been dismissed and ignored. First in 2014 with the changed bell schedules, then in 2016 with the closing of J.B. Young, earlier this summer with the changing bell times yet again, Vision 2020 and the possibility of closing yet another school. Each of these times the community has come out in opposition and the changes have been made anyway. Each time people say the same thing. Oh, they already had their mind made up. They hold the public forums just so that people can say that they care, but they do what they want no matter what. In the last several months, it's been said by board and community members alike that declining enrollment in the district needs to be addressed and to find ways to reverse that trend rather than accepting it as a given and continuing to strip communities of their neighborhood schools. Again, when people don't feel like they're important or feel like they're listened to, they leave. If there's a way to change enrollment trends, listening to and involving the community is a great starting point. It's time for you to do the job of changing the community's perception of the district. It's time to acknowledge the community and not just hear us, but to truly listen to us, validate our concerns, be transparent, tell us about the committees that do the brainstorming for the district, show us how to join them, give opportunities for discussion between the community and the board, where questions can be asked and answered, rather than just these 2-minute increments where we speak, hoping that some of our passion is relayed in such a way that's memorable and inspires discussion and meaningful change. We are the parents and employees who have the biggest stake in this game, our children and our livelihoods. Our entire lives are full of brainstorming and overcoming obstacles and stretching budgets so that kids can have what they need to succeed in our care. We can help. Our voices matter. Please listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Next is Sally Ellis.
Unfortunately, we can't keep kicking the can down the road, and the can gets heavier and heavier with loss of money. By 2020, I would suggest close the two...
Sally, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you give us...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right here. I just need your name and address
That's been
before
too
you...
long. Sally Ellis, 2216 North Nevada,
Thank you.
Davenport.
Yep.
Thank you. Close the two preschools, Hoover and Children's Village West. Put the preschoolers back into their feeder schools. This was talked about before. Better not to isolate the child getting used to school attending as at their age, and that would save a lot of money. Let's see. And then give up the art building site. That is the two preschools, Hoover and the art building. Repurpose Hoover into the Creative Arts Academy, giving up the lease on the bus station. Money saved. Questionable people hang out around and downstairs. Put the 6th graders back into the elementary with the exception of those turned into K through 8th. As in a plan, no changes, no different busing, they're still in their neighborhood. Close Adams and send the kids to Williams K through 8. Close Washington and send the kids to Sudlow K through 8. Close Monroe and send the kids to Smart K through 8th. Sell all 3 or turn one into the Mid-City High School, selling off the attached site to that's attached to the end-of-life facility. When even buying an attached building, I don't understand that. As you would want a standalone site for a school. When 18,000 students, we had one associate at each high school. Now there's 2 with 15,254 students. We're down 3,000 students from when I worked in the schools. It seems to me that maybe there are too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Lots of titles, curriculum coaches, liaisons, SAMs, directors. 100,000 each would keep 3 teachers and staff needed in the classroom. I know that these things are rough on people, and doing the school business and changing, but the Catholic schools have K through 8, and they have for years, and it works quite well. And I think it would work well for the school district, and we need to stop being in debt further and further and further every year. It's not right. And I'd like to thank Dr. Tate for his service. I honestly feel he's the best superintendent we've ever had, and I worked for the schools for 33 and a half years. And this is the truth. You are the best. I wish you wasn't leaving. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. And thank you all. Thank you, Kristan, John, Charlotte, Carrie, Karen, and Sally for sharing your thoughts, taking the time and effort to put together these thoughts and then present them. And Sally, in particular, I've missed Sally for the last few years. She used to come to almost every board meeting and tell us something. And so it's I know, I appreciate it. It's great that you're here, but thank you to all of you. And Sally, thanks for being back. We'll move on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move that the board accept the consent agenda as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seeing none? Oh, did you second it? Okay. Oh, okay. I apologize for forgetting about our Director Gosa. Is Director Gosa on the line? Director Gosa, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, we're getting ready to be voting on some issues. Want to make sure that you're available. So the motion was made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Are you prepared to vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Oh, Director Baek.
I would like a little bit of clarification on the contract with the 95% group. I guess, Corey, sorry, I didn't mean to wake you up or scare you, I guess. It's like a new program.
The 95% group contract has been in effect for probably the last 3 years. So this is a continuation of that contract, and this provides on-site coaching to our K2, well, actually K5 implementers. So this is on the phonics and phonemic awareness continuum, which is part of their core instruction.
Okay. And do we have data that supports that this particular company is the one that's doing a good job and we're seeing improvements? And
so in the last 3 years, we have seen a steady increase in our students' scores as far as their accuracy. So we look at our universal screening data and we look at how fluent students are. What we have seen over the last 3 years is that our students in Davenport are increasingly more accurate readers. They're not as fluent readers, and we aren't yet seeing that in their comprehension scores, but we are absolutely seeing an increase in their accuracy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Director DeSalvo, did you have something?
I have a couple things. The first one, I think I've asked this before, but I don't recall what the response was. Why do we purchase, is the yearbook only for Central? This isn't you. I'm sorry. And you can run and hide. The yearbook purchase, we do this for Central. Do we do it for the other high schools too? Does anybody
Rob,
know?
I told you that'd be the question.
Sorry. I'm so predictable.
Yeah, I think over the years you probably haven't seen this because the rate has just gone a little bit higher, so you'll start to see them from all three schools.
Okay. I have other questions. Okay, then I have a question about 5.04, the contract for the GAT architects. If I'm not saying that right, I'm sure I'm not. What's a building envelope assessment? I'm sorry. I read, but I don't.
This is the assessment of all of the exterior finish of the building, the masonry, the windows, the roofs, things of that nature. This focuses on masonry and tuck pointing needs in the future.
the wireless service and the maintenance contract renewal, Gary?
Hello, yes, the AirCore Wireless is a licensing product that we license to make all of our wireless work in the district, and it's an annual cost.
Okay, so these are for all the buildings?
All the buildings.
Okay, I was looking at the list and I couldn't decipher which was for all the buildings, so that was my question, if it was everywhere. Thank you. I think that might be it. Hold on, Allison, I'm sorry, I'm almost done. I should have written them separately. Sorry, I might have more questions, hold on. Come on. It's thinking. Okay, that answered that. I think I answered that when I read that last night. And look at this one. Nope, that was it.
Okay, thank you. Director Baek.
One more question. I think this is for Mr. Maloney. I noticed that we have 3 of our secure entry contracts in here, and they are from different vendors. And so is that, like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
We don't have like one big...
The security, this is the hardened security entrances in all of our buildings, and this was an emergency attempt to get security where we needed it. The challenge was that there wasn't enough time to get it all done. Separating it and parsing it out among 3 local vendors for contractors for doing that work was the only way we could really hope to accomplish that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? I have a question about the AIA contract. And that contract has been modified, is that right, Mr. Maloney? I started to try to read through it, and it was a bit challenging. And I didn't understand when we used that contract, and if it's under 50,000, other than coming through the consent agenda, I didn't know whether it had those modifications that we put in a few years ago or not.
Yes, Mr. Davidson has made a number of modifications to the standard AIA architect contract, and those are permanent modifications to the district contract.
Okay, great. Are there any other permanent modifications we should put in there?
Not that we know of at this time, but constantly subject to review.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion on the consent agenda? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director DeSalvo?
Yes.
Director Baek?
Yes.
Director Potts? Yes. Director Mayfield?
Yes.
Director Gosa?
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of bills?
Mr. President,
Director Baek.
I recommend that the board adopt the following resolution by the administration for the adoption of the bills from the bill listing periods of July 4th, 2018 through July 18th, 2018, special release approved by President, and July 19th, 2018 through August 8th, 2018. Resolved, all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the Secretary, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn on the Treasury for the several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of July 4th, 2018 through July 18th, 2018, special release approved by President, and July 19th, 2018 through August 8th, 2018.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director Baek?
Yes.
Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
Director DeSalvo?
Yes.
Director Mayfield?
Yes.
Director Gosa?
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Superintendent report.
No report tonight, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to other items requiring action. May I have motion regarding approval of a resolution for adoption of the 2017 Hazard Mitigation Plan update. Director Hayes.
I move that the board adopt resolution number 0108132018 approving the hazard mitigation plan and ordering its implementation. Whereas Scott County applied for and was awarded funding for the Pre-Disaster Mitigation Grant Program administered by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and through the Iowa Homeland Security and Emergency Management Division, IHSEMD, and updating the 2012 Scott County Multi-Jurisdictional Local Hazard Mitigation Plan, and whereas Scott County contracted by the Bi-State Regional Commission for assistance in preparing the plan, and whereas the Board of Directors of the Davenport Community School District, with assistance from Scott County and BSRC, has gathered information and prepared for Scott County 2017 Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan update, and whereas the Scott County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan update has been prepared in accordance with FEMA requirements of 44 CFR 2016, and whereas the plan process has been subject to public review and comment during its development, and whereas the board president and board directors of the Davenport Community School District has reviewed the plan, and now therefore be it resolved by the board president and board of directors of the Davenport Community School District that the board hereby approve and adopt the 2017 Scott County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan update, as this jurisdiction multi-hazard mitigation plan pending FEMA approval of the plan. The plan document will be adopted in the final format approval by FEMA. Adopted this 13th day of August 2018 at the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Directors of Davenport Community School District. A resolution of the Board of Directors of Davenport Community School District in support of the approval of adoption of the 2017 Scott County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan update.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Baek.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
Director Mayfield.
Yes.
Director DeSalvo.
Yes.
Director Potts. Yes. And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of Network Refresh 2018 Phase 2 project?
Mr. President,
Director DeSalvo.
I move that the board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the lowest responsible and responsive bid from Tri-City Electric for $360,000 for the Network Refresh 2018 Phase 2 project.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
Poor Gary, I ask him the same questions all the time. So phase 2 meaning just the next wave of schools that we're implementing this to?
Right, it's a naming convention. As far as 2018, we had two projects, both got schools done. The first phase of the project in 2018 was Central, Williams, and Walcott. Now we're moving on to Adams, Buffalo, Garfield, and Children's Village West.
Thank you.
Any additional discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Director DeSalvo.
Yes.
Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director Mayfield.
Yes.
Director Baek.
Yes.
Director Potts. Oh, I'm sorry, that was meant to be Gosa, excuse me. Director Gosa.
Yes.
No, you can't vote twice. Thank you. And my vote is yes, motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to discussion items. We have 3 of them. And I'm going to open the first one, but before I do, I wanted to say thank you to Mr. DeTay for offering to participate out. Are you still out there? Oh, there you are. We aren't really set up to have a discussion with the community in this portion of the discussion. And so, but I do appreciate your thoughtfulness and your thoughts as you shared them earlier. The first topic is replacing the superintendent's search. Or replacing the
Mary.
superintendent, excuse me,
Excuse
search.
me. Mary, may I get your assistance, please?
Did you want to stop the meeting?
No, but I need to get her attention.
All right, we're going to continue then. The topic is replacing the superintendent search versus hire within. Superintendent Tate has indicated, and we have accepted his intent to retire at the end of June 2019. And it's appropriate for us to make decisions on what we're going to do. We have to have a superintendent in the district. And part of the 2020 plan, in fact, Superintendent Tate, could you clarify what your thought was with respect to the 2020 plan and this portion, which is a superintendent which might be hired from within?
The 2020 plan includes a gross reduction of administration and support personnel of $1.5 million. It's a net of about $1 million because I always make the assumption that when you reduce some of the essential positions you now have, you may have to hire some people for assistance. But in that $1 million, not this year, but next year, $500,000 would come out, and then $250,000 each of the next 2 years by attrition. And the list included a lot of positions, and one of the positions was, instead of having a superintendent and 2 associates, that when I left, that one of the associates would be superintendent and leaving a superintendent and an associate. You have other things you could do. You could ask the associates to take other positions, but my plan was that you would save about $200,000 in salary and the benefits by reducing an associate.
Okay, thank you. So part of the plan that the superintendent has been working with is the idea that what he just expressed is that we could hire from within a superintendent, and that's something that I don't know if it's ever been done in this district. The reason that I took the lead in this discussion on is because I have participated in the past 2 searches, and I will say that they're very challenging. The last one that we went through, we discussed, well, in fact, I'll tell you that already there are probably, I've probably received at least 10 letters of interest from organizations that would like to do a search for us. And when you do that, you pay money for it. You have to figure out who the right organization is. Who do you want to do the search? At the last time we did a search, in fact, the local Chamber of Commerce offered to do a search at no cost, and the board rejected that idea, thinking that there might be a little bit too much conflict of interest if the chamber were the one that selected the superintendent, and the board would certify that position. I haven't checked on what the total expenses are, but when you go through a nationwide search, what happens is that if, let's say we had 10 organizations that said, we want to do a search for you, we would have to determine what organization do we want to do that work. So it takes some time. Normally, at least what we have done in the past, is to interview those organizations and then make a selection. Who do we want to do the selection? Then that organization goes out and looks for qualified candidates. So you've established all the qualifications, and there are many qualifications that are required of a superintendent. And I think in the last search, the organization came back with 26 qualified candidates. And then you have to winnow through those. How do you get down to one person that you want to select? And it's a little bit different than hiring a person for a position. It's very time consuming, and you bring in, I think what we did was then brought in 6 of the candidates, and then we winnowed it down to 3 and finally 1. And you do involve the community. There's a lot of additional work that goes in. I think that we estimated that the overall cost, and we would pay for all of the transportation, all of whatever goes into that. You all know what the what kind of at least where we are with respect to compensation right now with the superintendent, and you have to think about what that would be, and especially who you would be looking for. My guess is that the overall costs of a superintendent search would be in the range of $60,000 to $80,000. So that kind of gives you a brief review of what looking outside would look like, and I'm certainly willing to answer questions on that. And looking inside, you've gotten what the superintendent has thought to date. And so I would like the board to move on this issue. We have several months, certainly, but if we're going to do a search, and even if we were going to look from within, it's important to figure out how we're going to do it. We have to establish the processes, and so I would open it up to conversation now, and then at some point in the near future, the board will have to make a decision. How is it going to proceed? Director Baek.
So this is very much like an academic job search, which I have a lot of experience with, where when you bring in candidates from outside or internal candidates, you pay for all of their expenses to come to see you. You start off with a list of, or you start off with a job ad, then you winnow that down, you do phone interviews, and then you bring in a few candidates for in-person interviews, and then you go from there. One of the most important things to do is figure out what the job description is very clearly. And then, in my experience, when it's worked best is each person on the search committee, which in this case would be the whole board, has a rubric or a screening matrix. And each person goes through the applications and scores them based on certain criteria. For example, if we say we want somebody with 20 years of experience in a particular type of education, then people with 20 years of experience would get a 5, and people with 5 years of experience might get a 1 or something like that. And what you end up with is a pretty objective way of evaluating the qualifications of candidates. And then there's always leeway for that interpersonal relationship, which is always part of a job interview as well. So I think we should do it that way no matter whether we go outside or inside. But it's important for us to figure out what we're looking for and what this district needs before we do anything. And if that means we end up with an interim, so be it. You know, sometimes that's the best option, is to go with an interim and give us a little bit more time on the search, especially given all of the other things that we've got going on. So, and an interim would typically be one of our associates.
Is there any other discussion? Director Hayes.
With our additional problems that we have right now financially, I would be in favor of an interim for a little bit to get a plan devised on, first of all, what we're going to take to the SBRC and see how that goes, rather than wasting additional monies that we don't have. And I like the idea of the process with the rubrics, whether inside or out, but I'm in favor of an interim.
Is there additional discussion? Director Potts.
I just had my question would be, if you do this not international search, but this hire a search firm, does that automatically preclude internal candidates from applying, and or does that give the search firm the ability to eliminate internal, you know what I'm saying? If we're interested in looking at internal people, but we still want to keep the door open with a search firm, can you hybridize that somehow?
I'm certain that you could. These people are in it to make money, and they will, I'm sure that they would recognize. Did you want to say something?
Just, I know in academia that's done all the time. You open up the job ad and whoever applies, and whether it's an internal or an external candidate, it doesn't matter. You take whoever applies, right, and go from there. It doesn't eliminate anybody from the pool internally if you go with a search firm. I'm not saying search firm is necessarily the best way to go. For presidents,
excuse me, let me, if I could continue then, if we were to hire a search firm, they would be working for us, and they would do whatever we say. If we say, go outside, go inside, they would do that. They wouldn't make the leap that it would include inside unless the board said that's part of what it's going to do. But that's one of the things, and it may be a little bit of a difference, is that the search firms go at least nationwide. And I will say that that is an incredibly tough deal. If the board were to take on the search itself, that would be very, very difficult, very time consuming. And I'll get into that later. Just recognize that if you bypass that portion and you're going to go outside, it's going to be a lot of work. Did you have more to say, Director Potts? Okay. All right. Director DeSalvo.
I think we need to take the time to do the community, ourselves, our students, our staff, the very best search that we can. And to me, that should be investing the money to do it right. And it might be an internal candidate, and I would hope that if we did this search, they could apply as well and be considered as part of whomever from wherever applies. It's an open position that we have. We've hired a headhunter to bring in candidates that we may not have access to get to, but then those that are here could. I don't mind having an interim person put in place to take the time to do it right, but I think that our community and our students deserve that. And so I don't want to rush into something because we have to hurry to get this through. I want it to be done appropriately. I want the community involvement. I want our teacher involvement. Let's hear from our students. We've got high schoolers that may have an idea of what they're looking for. I mean, I'm speaking way out, but I think we need to do this right. And so I would like to do the nationwide search whenever that would have to occur. Waiting to get it done right would be appropriate to me.
Director Mayfield, do you have any comments? Yes, that's correct. Director Gosa, do you have any thoughts?
I agree with the other directors. I do feel that we should spend some time and make sure we get the right candidate. It seems like every time we rush into things, we wind up with more of a headache than we should.
Director Potts, I wasn't very clear on where you are on this idea. You really just asked whether if we hired a search firm, could we look within, right?
Yeah, that was
But
what I want to know. And if your answer was we can control that, so I would
Mhm.
be okay with a search firm.
okay.
But
Well,
I think in a larger sense, we have to, the first thing I think we need to do is we need to, as a board, decide what we want the person we're hiring to do. We need to be very clear on what our vision is for them to do. Because I'm afraid if we're not firm on that, we run the risk of hiring someone who has their own, I don't want to say agenda, that sounds rather strong, but has their own ideas of how this district should operate and may not be in sync with our vision of where we want to go, okay? And I think that's important. First of all, we have a very clear, crystal clear, crisp vision of what we want this new superintendent to do, rather than having candidates sell us on what they're going to do. I've trying to add it up in my head. I think I've had 8 superintendents, okay? And every one of them got fired except this one. No, I take that back. Blanche didn't get fired, okay? And so, a lot of times I think we've hired people, and I've been on the receiving end, I've been on the hiring end. And you get people that have their own agendas, and if we're not clear on what we want this new superintendent to accomplish, I just think that's first. And then we can do an international search. The person who we select has to be someone who we're convinced is going to decided we need to have done.
Excuse me, John, there's no good way for you to participate in the board discussion. I understand, but John, what we're doing is we're trying to follow the Iowa laws, and the Iowa laws on open meeting laws, and our policies. Excuse me, John, I have to respectfully call you out of order. Okay, this is a discussion of the board, and I'd love to engage with you at some point and talk about how you would participate in a board discussion, but this is not it. Okay, so please accept that. Okay, all right, thank you. Superintendent Tate, did you have something?
Just some thoughts. This is my 5th district, and that means I've interviewed about 20 times, so I know how this thing works. If you get when you get a firm, they spend most of their time getting the profile. It's not just from the board, it's from the community. I mean, they go out and have 5 or 6 community meetings, and I've seen pages and pages of reports of what the community wants. Also, when it comes down to the hiring, I mean, it doesn't have to be the board that is just alone making the hiring. The board can have other people with them to do the assessment. So, I mean, there's a lot of time for input. Secondly, you have time to do it. It's not though you're rushing. What you have to do is kind of decide pretty quickly you want to bring some of these companies in, because you're going to have to interview 4 or 5 of them. You then have to pick who it's going to be, and they pretty well take off with the thing for a while. So I wouldn't suggest you need, if that's the direction you're going, you have to delay at all. I just want to remind you, if you go this route, though, the second year 1920, I had a $500,000 reduction because of the hiring freeze. That now becomes the $250,000 because you lose the salary differential. Plus, it's going to cost you about $50,000, I think, to run this. So now I've got to find another $250,000 in reductions. Just want to put that out there.
And thank you for that reminder, and I hope the whole board keeps that in focus, because our presentation to the SBRC in October will have to take that into account if that's the decision that we make. Is there any other discussion on this item? Director Baek.
I think we would not be doing our due diligence if we decided not to do a search because we're worried about the SBRC. I think we need to do the best search for our district, for our students, for our families. And if that means we have to go with a search firm, then that's what we have to do. I understand that we're under budget constraints, but this isn't something that you can just do casually. Personally, I already think it's too late to find anybody outside national for next year anyway, and I would advocate for an interim and then give us the time to deal with that, and it would save us the money, at least in the next year. Or two.
Superintendent Tate.
You're in the prime season right now. It's not too late. Oh, no. I mean, I saw your advertisement for this job in maybe October, November.
But didn't you just say we'd have to interview firms first?
Yeah, but you have to get going on that. But as
Yeah.
far as people ready, I mean, you
This is
interview
a
a
good
firm
season
and then
for
they
it?
take off. So, no,
Okay.
you're not late
Good.
at all.
Good to know.
Yeah, I didn't dig up the timeline, but I think that, in fact, when Dr. Tate interviewed with the board, if I recall properly, it was in December, January, and I think that the decision was probably made by April. And so my recollection is that it was approximately a 6-month process. And again, with all of these firms sending information to me right now, they've recognized that, and I have decided not to contact any of them until we have this discussion. Is there any other discussion? I want to give a little bit of, okay, Director Mayfield.
Thought I had it on.
Could you
Not
repeat that?
particularly, but
well,
I'll do it again.
But
so you
Director
can hear.
Gosa hasn't heard what you said.
I just mentioned that 1 out of 8 is not too good when it comes to hiring superintendents. He was the only one, at least I heard initially, that was not fired. But now we know that there was 3 of them out of those 8 possibly that were not fired. And my experience with only one other term on the board was with Dr. Flynn, and he, far as I know, did not get fired. So, but I'm glad to hear that that percentage is up to 3 versus what you were saying before, only 1 that was able to stay. Did you get that, Dan? Maybe I need to do it again.
No, you don't. I'm not even sure what the relevance is, but were you done with your comments?
The relevance was I was surprised. I wouldn't comment on it.
Okay. Director Gosa, do you have anything else to add?
No, I do not.
Any other thoughts here? I do want to express that when I first came on the board, Dr. Sherman was the interim superintendent, and he came in because the search firm that had been working on it before did not come up with a candidate that the board approved at that time. That was right before I came on. Dr. Sherman was the interim, and several people have advocated for an interim. It isn't as if that comes free either. I think, I'm just recollecting back, but I'm sure that we paid fairly handsomely for that because it's a part-time situation. So on top of, if we do this, if we hire a search firm and if we take Superintendent Tate's estimate of $50,000 plus and he's estimated that we have to come up with $250 because we would maintain our current executive staff, and we would hire a superintendent interim, which he has not accounted for in that $250, correct? So let's just estimate that we're going to add another $200,000 to the bogey for next year. We would have $50,000 for the search firm, $200,000 for a if we were to hire from within. And that's been part of his plan, and part of his plan has not been to pay for an interim. I'm just suggesting that you add another $200,000 and think about that. And I understand that it's important to get the right person, but we have to make these difficult decisions. And if we're going to make a decision that adds another $450,000 to our expenses for next year, and here in a couple of months we're going to go and tell the SBRC that we're going to spend that additional $450, and I just hope. I'm stunned by the plans anyway, and I'll discuss that when we get to Vision 2020. And if this is the direction that the board wants to go, then we'll start moving in that direction. But just be aware of all of these costs. Director Baek.
I guess I'm just a little bit confused because if we hire an interim from within, we pay, say, superintendent salary, something similar to what Dr. Tate is getting now, right? And we lose an associate superintendent position.
The suggestion was not to hire an interim from within. The suggestions that were made were to hire an interim. And
I'm sorry, I thought I suggested to hire an interim from within. That was what I was trying to suggest.
Well, it may have been what you, and perhaps I misunderstood.
Okay.
The people that said interim, are you thinking interim from within?
Yes.
So that presents a different set of challenges.
Right. It does, but it saves, it prevents some of that expenditure. That's why I was confused.
It may, if you could find somebody that would be willing to take an interim position as a superintendent, and then when you hire somebody else, what are you going to do with that person?
It doesn't mean you necessarily have to hire somebody else. They may apply for the position and take it on. Right?
Perhaps, but I'm just saying, if that is that what everybody is saying, is hire an interim from within to take the superintendent position temporarily while we do a search. Is that correct? Director DeSalvo.
I was only going down that path because I want to make sure we don't rush into this decision. But Dr. Tate has kind of given me a little bit of comfort in that we're not behind right now. We can start this search right now. We can start this process and not maybe have to have an interim before he leaves. In the event that we can't get this decision made appropriately and in whole by the time Dr. Tate leaves, then we would have to appoint. And you said Dr. Who was appointed as interim when you?
Dr. Sherman was hired, not appointed.
Okay, so
right.
My point was make a good decision. Take the time to make the good decision. If we have to have an interim fill in until we have that decision made, that interim is more than welcome to apply. I guess I'm not sure exactly how that process would work, but I wasn't saying go out and search for an interim person and hire them and then go out and hire the real person. I was saying appoint someone. We have two of them. Maybe they can both fill in until we have the search complete. And then hire the person that we choose. Maybe them, maybe someone externally. We just don't know at this point.
Director Hayes.
And those are my thoughts as well, too, to hire the interim to have someone, and we can take our time. And it's literally a dual process. We take our time and get what we actually want, and we're saving some money in the process.
Director Mayfield.
I've seen advertisements in January to take over in July 1st. I mean, yeah. Well, if you started now, you would probably be hiring for 1 July. And it's plenty of time. This is the season right now. I mean, there's not even any advertisements in Education Weekly yet. And when they you could, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes it faltered, yeah.
Director Baek.
Yeah, actually, after having heard Dr. Tate's timeline, I'm reassured that we are not behind schedule. And I think what Director Mayfield just said, you know, if we can do it properly, starting now with a national search or whatever search we decide to do, if we don't find the person we want, then we can appoint an interim. We don't have to, but we have that option. But if we're within the normal time frame of deciding what we want and starting a process of hiring a superintendent, then I'm fine. I don't necessarily think we have to go with an interim, if that makes sense.
Superintendent Tate, how does this, can you project how, I mean, we haven't made any decisions, but what is your thought on how this affects the 2020, and how does it affect our presentation and the SBRC's approval of the 2020 plan?
Well, the difference is in year 1920, instead of a $500,000 savings for hiring freeze and reduction, it'll be about a net of 250 with, not with replacing the superintendent and also the cost of the search. So it's just a matter that I need to dig and find another $250,000 in savings.
But the $250,000 wasn't a one-time deal, was it, in the plan? I mean, if you were anticipating reducing a position, and if the board hires a superintendent from outside, then we don't pick up that 250 or 200,000 ever, do we?
Correct.
And so the plan then at year 5, we would be negative 200,000 on plan B, and negative 800,000 on plan A. I'm sorry, positive 800,000 on plan A, right?
If you don't reduce more, I would just have to dig in, try to find some more reductions.
Okay. All right. So what I've interpreted is that the board, and I'm going to make a comment in the next, not in the next one, on Vision 2020. I want to make sure that I've given every board member adequate time to represent their opinions, and that I've interpreted properly that the majority of the board, I believe the consensus, is that we will start a search immediately, and we'll consider an interim if we need to, and Dr. Tate will find the additional money and reductions to satisfy the 2020 plan coming up in October. Director Baek.
I'm still a little bit confused on the projection of money. Like, was this because we assumed that we would cut an associate position and keep a superintendent?
Yep.
But are those necessarily mutually exclusive?
No, they're not.
Okay.
And just to clarify, it was just part of the superintendent's plan, and so he'll just have to find the money somewhere else. Sure.
But I'm trying to clarify that even if we hire a superintendent from out in superintendent land, that doesn't mean we can't go down to one associate also.
Well, I suppose
Correct.
that's true.
Right?
I'm not sure how.
I guess
what
I'm
your
trying
thoughts
to.
are.
I'm trying to. There's no reason we can't consider both of those options, right?
But that isn't part of the plan right now. If you're going to make that recommendation, that would be a totally different recommendation that we have never discussed.
Okay.
Anyway, have I interpreted correctly? That's where the board wants to go? Okay. So with that being said, what I'm going to ask for is 2 board members to volunteer to assist in this effort. And I'd like to start as early as tomorrow. So if you have an interest, please communicate with our secretary. This is a long, tough deal, and it really is. And so anyway, I'd appreciate some assistance from board members in this kind of special project. With that, we'll move on to transfer policy.
I just want to run something by the board that the associates and I are thinking about concerning transfer policy. We'll bring it back at another time when we have it fleshed out a little bit more. About 5 years ago, we strengthened and made more strict our transfer policy, and that was because 3 schools, Harrison, Garfield, and Washington, were just bursting at the seams, and many of the students in their neighborhoods could not attend the schools. And this came because we had a very liberal transfer policy for many, many years. It happened over a long time. So the board at that time put into place a transfer policy that says at high school level you have open enrollment, but at elementary and intermediate you must go to school in your boundary unless you got a special, you made an appeal, and it had to be an extraordinary health, safety, or security reason. And the appeals went through the associate superintendents, and then they came to me, and we have had hundreds. And probably in that time, maybe approval of 20 or so, because there are ones that are proven bullying cases, health cases. We run it through either our district nurse or our doctor to look at, and we really spend a lot of time to make sure if we're making an exception, then it is extraordinary. We're looking at what if we had no restrictions to open enrollment. In other words, you could go to any school you wanted to, provided that they had room. And we would have to have a standard that we're talking about. In fact, the policy itself talks about we're only going to 85% capacity. I'm not sure that's the right number, but we're talking about we'd also have to look at a formula to make sure that we see historically how many people move in during the year and the summer, because we don't want to exclude people from coming to the neighborhood, the people that open enroll. So our diversity plan talks about that right now you can go from A school to B school, B school, A school, and it'd really be anybody could go. We probably give that a priority because we do have a diversity plan that we have to adhere to. So I just want to throw that out. I know I remember hearing Mr. Kluhl talk about that every single year. I know that President Johansson has talked about it, and we're thinking about seeing if we can come up with a policy which would be fair and would give people more choice.
Director Baek.
So basically, the idea is that parents could choose whatever elementary school they wanted, provided there was space, but we would structure it some way so that no parent who resides in the neighborhood is excluded from sending their children to that school.
We would try to project it. We'd use a formula, look at the average that comes in each year. The other part of that, they'd have to provide their own transportation.
Right.
To do that.
I guess I think there was something like this when I was a kid in Memphis in public schools, and a lot of the transfers came down to a lottery system, particularly for the schools that everybody wanted to go to. Is that something that we would end up potentially considering?
I think it would. In fact, I have mentioned that when I was just discussing among the associates that it would be, a cutoff date, 1 March, and then if there's more than we have room, there would have to be a lottery.
Director Mayfield.
I believe, in theory, that would be great if everybody could go to the school they went to. Let's go back about 3 years. Part of the problem that we had at JB was that a lot of people chose not to go there in the neighborhood. I'm talking about, I live 2 blocks from here, and I know neighbors that decided they did not want to put their kids in JB. Why? Would you want to put your kid in a school that had 82 police calls in 1 year? That says something was wrong. Something was happening that shouldn't be happening. And you can blame it on the neighborhood, you could blame it on the kids, or you could blame it on the administration that was working at that school and should have kept order. But it definitely is a reality and a fact that that's what happened at JB. Through deterioration, those that could move did. Those that could send their kid to another school did. because of what was going on in the schools. Keep in mind, 82 police calls. You can't say it was the kids. You could say it was the neighborhood, but it's basically who's running the school, the kids or the administration. So I see opening this policy up that there's certain schools that kids are going to end up leaving because the parents do not feel they're safe, even though we just got the okay to have more security. I don't believe that's really the answer to it. So I think from my perspective, just opening it up is going to really hurt our diversity plan. And that's going to hurt the Davenport school districts in the end.
Thank you. Director DeSalvo.
I struggle with it a little bit because I think of when, and a long time ago when I was in school, you stayed with those kids all the way through. And I hate what I see in our high schools, and I hear it that, well, they're jumping here because they want to play baseball there, and they're going there because they have a better this, or they're jumping for the wrong reasons, and we don't have that camaraderie all the way through. We talked about these paths, and we talked about, I forget the word that the associate superintendents use, the feeder schools. I feel we would lose some of that by opening this up. I feel we have a problem in our high schools by letting them go wherever they want to, whenever they want to. So I would have concerns with allowing that at this level as well, just because I agree with Director Mayfield. I would be concerned for our diversity plan, and I would be concerned that they would lose that camaraderie that we've got to establish. We've got to keep these kids together. It means something to me, and I feel that that's very important.
Anybody else? That it? Director Gosa, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. It kind of sounds like a cool concept that would help out some of the high school programs, I guess, in a sense, because then if you know your kid wants to go to Central, West, North, or whatever, they would be able to get into one of the elementaries that feed there, so they start all the way up and then into the intermediates and so on. So I think that's a pretty cool concept. I'll be interested to hear more about it.
Excuse me. Anything else? Director Potts.
I don't see anything initially wrong with the idea of allowing parents at least an opportunity to change schools. It's not a guarantee. This has been an issue that we've dealt with for forever. I mean, 25 years ago when I was down at Frank L. Smart, every day at registration, parents from J.B. Young or Wood or somebody showed up at registration to transfer their kid to Smart. Parents are motivated by a variety of things. And I just think if you can expand the options that a parent has, you're increasing the likelihood that those people will stay in our school district and stay in our schools. And I also think it motivated us at Smart to make sure we were better at what we were doing, because just as on registration day kids showed up trying to come to Smart, I got phone calls from Smart kids that showed up other places trying to go there for a variety of reasons, real or imagined. And I just think it gives parents the option. You're still staying in our schools. And I don't know, so long as we have a framework in place so that you don't wind up with, 35 kids in a class because everybody for one reason or another wants to beat a path to, Pierce Elementary School. I know there's no Pierce Elementary School. I use that as an example.
Thank you. Director Hayes.
I really like the thought of parents having the option of their children going where they want them to go, but I do have the diversity concerns as well. What would be the balance? Would there be a limit? How would we be able to control it?
Was that it? Okay. Anybody else? Director Baek, have you weighed in?
No. Yeah, I have concerns. I'm not against the idea off the top of my head, but I'd be concerned about the diversity. It could be good for diversity. I just think we need to make sure we take a cautious approach, I guess. I'm not against it. I'm not for it.
Okay. Anybody else? I was on the board when we did this, and the thought, originally there was some thinking about doing this back then, but it was perceived back then as being way too radical, and that we could maybe do it with the high school, but any grades lower than that would be crazy. But things have changed. A couple of board members have talked about the diversity plan, and recall that the diversity plan is really based on SES, and there is no mention of race in the diversity plan, and that was disallowed. The board back then made a decision based on a U.S. Supreme Court decision that it was going to take out race out of the diversity plan, which came from the voluntary desegregation plan. And so it isn't even part of our diversity plan, and it is not allowed to be in there according to our board. Now, technically, there would be a way if the board wanted to change the diversity plan, and I'm just mentioning that because if the diversity plan is part of the thinking, we have to be very careful about recognizing what that means. Well, let me continue on. A couple things that I heard is that having a feeder school is more important than education. I know that wasn't the intent, but when I think about choice, and I think about choice in the United States, I think about choice in Iowa, in Davenport, and I believe that if I had kids in school right now, which I do not, my kids are grown, they went through these schools, but they've long graduated. But I think that I would like to look at things, for instance, like we do at Buffalo with the STEAM program, and we do have that option right now. And if I wanted to send my student to whatever school, I would prefer to have the freedom to do that rather than the thought that I have to go to this school because we want feeder programs. Our transportation programs are a lot different now than they used to be. We used to have neighborhood schools, and Director Mayfield has talked about neighborhood schools and the value of those, and certainly they are important. At the same time, I've had parents call me up and say, I won't let my kid walk 3 blocks to school. And so either you bus them or I'm going to transport them. I will say that I believe that education is what we're about, and that it is more important even than a feeder program. And that if that's the way the board believes, is that we have to provide feeder programs or that we have to address our diversity plan, then that's the way it'll go. But I support the idea, I always have, of the freedom to send kids to where I wanted to send them. We have parents that homeschool their kids. We have a lot of parents out there that send their kids to private schools and to a lot of schools that we, in fact, distribute state money to their preschool programs. So anyway, I'm for further investigation. Is there any additional discussion? Director Mayfield.
on. Those that have the finances to put their child in another school will do. You know, it's really ironic that we're having this discussion because all of a sudden we're all conscientious about parents making the choices of where their kids can go. You know, how many of them would like to go to Bettendorf or North Scott? You know, there are people, even those that work in our schools, that choose to put their kids in Bettendorf or North Scott. Now, the reason that I say that is that not everybody has those choices. They're restrained by what it takes financially. But we are totally against that. And I think if we're going to open the schools up within, and I'm talking about elementary, we do have them open as far as high school. Any high school student can attend any, well, with the exception of Mid-City. You have to get permission to go there, I believe. But the other 3 high schools, you don't need permission. You just say, I want to go there. So to me, to open it up and create the chaos that I believe it will, and we'll end up in the future losing some schools, or we will end up having to build more schools, which we keep saying that we are over capacity right now as far as having more school rooms than we need. That will be basically because we've let kids go and we've shifted our demographics, because kids out of certain schools are going to end up going to others. When those schools get, should I say, too many students, then we're going to end up either building new schools, or how are you going to get those schools that have the lower capacity? Because we've closed a couple schools saying they have too low a capacity. And that will definitely create that. So it's something to think about when you're talking about elementary and junior high, opening up for people to go where they want to. I hope that was relative to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other discussion? Director Hayes.
Also, just for purposes of clarity, I don't think anyone here said that feeders were more important than education. I think we feel education is first and foremost here, and then I think a couple did voice opinions with the interest of feeders, keeping that consistent. But I think I wanted to make it clear that I think everyone here was not implying that education wasn't most important.
And let me respond to that. It's just that I think that we have a sense in our district, and oftentimes we talk about sports as really this is what it's all about. And when we talk about feeders and that this is why we want to keep you in this school, that's my interpretation, is that the feeder program is more important than education. So, and perhaps I've misinterpreted, but I think it's a strong sense in this district that we should be having feeder programs, and we've had numerous people over the years talk about how important that is. Any other discussion on this? I want to say I haven't heard any consensus. Superintendent Tate, have you gotten enough discussion that you know what you want to do?
Well, I've got good notes. I think we need to see if we can perhaps put something together that satisfies all of your ideas and thoughts. We may not be able to, but it was a good discussion. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Director Baek.
Would this include the opportunity for people to transfer for special ed programs as well? Would we have like magnet centers or something like that where people want to send their children to a particular special ed program, or how would that fit in?
Have to give that some thought.
Okay.
Yeah, our policy doesn't address that right now, but certainly as long as there's a like program that meets their IEP needs and there's room, so yep, let's give it some thought.
Okay, anybody else? All right, we're going to move on to our last discussion item. Now, I plumb forgot that we normally take a break after a couple of hours. What's the board's thoughts? You want to continue and finish with our last discussion item? Do you want to take a 5-minute break? Huh? Keep going? Okay, well, okay. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was comfortable. Okay, before I turn this over to the superintendent, I want to say that at the last meeting that we had, we talked about a Plan A and a Plan B. And my interpretation of the consensus was that the board supported, generally speaking, Plan B. I will say that, and in fact, you have Plan B there, Superintendent Tate. As I reviewed it, it looked to me like the third year of insurance holidays was part of your Plan B, but I believe it was disallowed in the actuary study. And so it struck me that it's going to be even more difficult to attain those, and I think in the third year it was a couple of holidays, which would be another couple $1 million, which would probably put us negative in both cases, A and B. The reason I'm mentioning this is, and then I'll say one more thing. A couple of board members have talked to me and suggested that I misinterpreted the consensus, and as well one of our community members said that I had not allowed sufficient time for the board members to indicate where they were. So the reason for all this is that I am planning on most likely having another special meeting before August 27th to discuss this. And I just want you all to be aware, because if I didn't allow sufficient time, or if I misinterpreted, it could dramatically affect our vote on the 27th. So with that, Superintendent Tate, you want to discuss 2020?
I just wanted to reiterate the committee, the whole meeting, and what I heard, and some of the changes that the next Plan B will show. Since you're going out for superintendent search on school year 1920, it's going to show under hiring freeze and reduction of administration district support positions a $250,000 reduction rather than the $500,000 until I work and find if I can find some more reductions. Also, as President Johansson mentioned, in the third year, rather than 2 insurance holidays, that's 21-22, I actually have a 0 because the actuary study indicated that we could not do that and maintain the fund. So what I have or will enter there instead is a new statement that shows a change in the plan designs for our health plans and employee contributions, but I'm really waiting to get some input from our consultants who are here to tell me what is the possibility for that. So that's going to change somewhat. Plus, I had mentioned that what I heard and what I would report at the SBRC, unless at the special meeting you change this, was that there would be a serious study of the possibility of school mergers to K-8. So I just want to at least indicate those are the changes which I'm reflecting on my Plan B, and if President Johansson is going to talk about a special meeting, then we could discuss it even further then.
Okay, thank you. We'll open it up for discussion. Anybody? Director Baek.
I have had some discussions with, myself and community members and a couple other people and one other board member, and we came up with sort of a modified consolidation plan, which was shared with Dr. Tate and Director Johansson, and it's probably not feasible for this coming year because it involves some pretty radical changes, but it kind of falls into the not kick the can down the road category, and rip off the Band-Aid or go big or go home, whatever phrase you want to use. So I typed it up. I don't think everybody I don't think everybody has it yet, but I wanted to propose that we consolidate at least 2 middle schools and probably 3 with their neighboring elementary school, but we do that by using PEPAL money to add classrooms so that we're not at, I think in the last proposal it said like 100% capacity in some of the schools, which isn't really feasible. With that, it's a big change, but it would free up 3 elementary school buildings, which could be repurposed or sold. So, for example, the Monroe building could be used for something in the community. We'd keep the elementary education in the neighborhood if we are going to do that. We could reduce some staff because we'd have a larger building. I know I heard tonight from the community that perhaps changes like libraries and things like that might not be feasible, and that's something that I think we should look into. Doing the same with, say, with Williams and Adams, adding some space to Williams, and then we can sell off Adams. The money that we save from that building could be used as part of renovation. And then even considering Sudlow and Washington, all of this with the idea that we keep the boundaries now the same, so that the students, we're not changing any of the school boundaries and we're not moving any students. So we're adding classrooms so that we can increase the capacity. This would also help with transportation costs because traditionally K-8 schools everybody starts at one time. So everybody would start at elementary time, and we'd have fewer bus routes because they'd all be going to the same place at the same time. Let's see, some other advantages. Again, I said reduction in staff. Let's see. We also talked about keeping the early retirement incentives that have been proposed currently, keeping some of the increases in classroom size, slight increases in classroom size that are on some of the current plans. The idea being that we have PEPAL monies for renovation, but we could basically use that to generate general fund savings, hopefully. That's kind of the basic idea here. So I would like to submit that proposal. Again, I realize it may not be something that we want to look at for this year, and because it may take too long to figure out the details, but I think it's something worth considering.
Any additional discussion? Director DeSalvo, you got something?
Well, I was just, there's just a lot to take in, and I would be greatly in favor of another meeting before we have to come to a final vote on this. I think that Dr. Tate is going to get us some more data that will help perhaps enhance some of this plan, and Director Baek came up with some suggestions. So there's just a lot going on, and I really think we do need to meet again. So I would be greatly in favor of meeting again to talk about the revised Plan B.
Any other discussion? Director Gosa, you got anything?
Not at this time.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I'm interpreting correctly, because a modified Plan B really didn't allow for any sort of consolidation or change in attendance centers. And not that I'm asking for a different consensus. My interpretation was that the board generally had a consensus to support Plan B, and I think what happened then is that the administration and the superintendent in particular had taken that to mean no consolidation, no changes in attendance centers. And so anything that we do in that area, my intent in suggesting another meeting is because of some of these things that Director Baek did talk about towards the end of the last meeting, and a couple of other board members have suggested that maybe there is room to move on that. So I'm probably, I'll look at the schedules and see what we can do, but it probably wouldn't be until next week that we could even have something. Director Baek?
Yeah, I would be very much in favor of another meeting to discuss this. I think there was some communication issues on exactly what everybody meant in terms of closing versus consolidation. So I think it would be a good idea to have another meeting.
Okay, Director Hayes.
I would be in favor of another meeting. However, I would have to meet prior to the 22nd of next week.
What's the date?
Today is the 13th. Yeah, 'cause I'll
Okay.
be gone until the 27th. Yes. I'm
Okay,
never
thank
home
you.
from a birthday.
I will, I'll talk with you before we set up anything. Okay, if there's no other discussion on the Vision 2020, then we will move on. Are there any administrative reports? Are there any board requests? I haven't seen any. Oh. Thank you. Okay, there's one request. It's an information request from Director Baek, today's date. I'd like information and a presentation on what programs are currently implemented in our schools that target declining enrollment. Specifically, I'd like to know what is happening at the elementary, middle, and high school levels to prevent dropouts or students falling through the cracks. Why are you requesting this information? Given our current discussion, knowing the data on what programs are working would help us boost those programs and drop those that are not working. Addressing declining enrollment is imperative for avoiding school closures in the future. Is there a second? When would you like this information or agenda item? As soon as feasible.
I did not use the abbreviation.
You didn't. That's very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. What? Oh, you have another board request? Oh, then we'll wait for you.
Did you see Cindy's email? Did Cindy send us an email? John, did you mention the same? I told her she would be interested in doing that. It's very interesting concept. I think it's important, yeah.
To get it done will be very imperative, I think, to helping us.
All of the stuff, the special ed stuff, the declining enrollment, all that, yeah, I agree.
I wonder how much it costs, but I agree.
I know. Did it shut down? Wow. Uh-oh. Stop. Okay. We heard a lot of really good ideas tonight.
All right, thank you. We have one more board request. This is from Director Mayfield, today's date. The request is the original cost of the JB project. What will be the cost of overruns for the JB project? Okay, thank you. Why are you requesting this information or agenda item? Need to know. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. When would you like this information?
Again, as soon as possible. I had a request 7 weeks ago, and I haven't received that information. I
directing the question now. Yes, should I answer? Yes, you want me to answer? I didn't hear you, what you said.
I suppose.
Yes, then Mary has the information, and so she'll get emailed to the board tomorrow.
Okay, you told me this meeting.
Okay.
I had it for you, but they wanted the entire board to get it, so it'll go to the
Right.
entire board.
Yeah, in almost all cases, that's the way it goes, is that the entire board would get it. Is this an information request or an agenda item?
Information.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.